Say, this is a prayer for Alberta. Ready? Oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Ottawa is killing us. We must make amends. Worked hard all our lifetimes. No help from those friends. Oh Lord, won't you bring us independence? Oh Lord, won't you get us a way to be free from Ottawa, from Liberals, from the NDP. I wait for delivery each day until the 3. Oh Lord, won't you get me a way to be free? Oh Lord, won't you give me just one night without no clowns, no Nenshi, no gun deck, no carny to bring me down. Prove that you love me and get them out of town. Oh Lord, won't you give me just one night without no clowns? Thank you.
Well, that was pretty incredible. I love that. Woo! That was wonderful. So we are going to start our evening out now. Looks like we have everybody either standing or seated. So I'm going to invite our first speaker to come up. I have had the pleasure of getting to know this incredible lady over the last year. She puts her heart and soul into everything that she does. She's a mother, she's an Albertan, she is proud and she is passionate. She has been a member of the APP and involved in numerous projects that we have put on. I'd like to give a big loud round of applause for Miss Tanya Clemens.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for being here. I'm not here tonight as a politician, an expert, or even a very polished speaker. I'm just a farm girl who loves Alberta. And like many of you, I've hit the point where I can't sit back and hope that Ottawa is suddenly going to start treating us fairly. Because let's be honest, they have not, and they will not. This movement, guided through the education and organization provided by the Alberta Prosperity Project, isn't about making noise or stirring things up for attention. It's about real, lawful, and practical steps to take back control of our future, using our rights, our Constitution, and our voices. There is a path forward. Working with the APP these last few years has given me so much hope. Tonight is about accountability and taking ownership for the future of this province that we love so dearly. It's about making decisions here in Alberta by Albertans for the benefit of our families, our industries, and our land. And most importantly, this is a grassroots effort. No party machine, no backroom deals, just regular people like you and I who've had enough and are willing to stand up. But we need... But we do need to be careful because we've also seen how easily this can get derailed. New parties show up, personal agendas creep in, people try to split the movement for ego or attention. That's not how we win, that's how we lose. And make no mistake, division is Ottawa's greatest ally. As Mitch would say, we need to stay laser focused. We need to talk to each other, not over each other. We need civil conversations and we need clarity over chaos. And perhaps most of all, we need numbers. We need big numbers. Let's build something so strong and so principled that it can't be ignored. We have one shot to do this, and it starts with commitment. So if you haven't signed yet, please do it tonight. And don't stop there. Talk to the people in your lives. Tell them why this matters. Help them see what's possible, what a prosperous and sovereign Alberta will mean to each of us. Tonight, let's listen, let's ask our questions, let's leave better informed and more committed than when we walked in. Thank you. because this Alberta of ours is so worth it. Thank you.
When you do sign up for a membership or to receive our emails, we will email you. That is one of the things that we do. And we need you to open those emails. We need you to look at them, forward them on. We're sending you those emails so that you can be informed step by step as we move through this process. Our second speaker this evening likely needs no introduction. Many of you might know him. He was a cardiac thoracic surgeon for many, many years. I often think that maybe he did my surgery when I was 2 years old. Dr. Denis Modry has always led with courageous and conviction. He's been one of the loudest voices. He's the founder of APP and the reason that all of you are here tonight. So I would like to welcome Denis Modry up to the stage.
Wow. Hardly know where to begin. But thank you so much. It's just wonderful. Thank you for your kind introduction. It's wonderful to see so many people here this evening. And thank you from the bottom of my heart, that's getting older, for being here tonight. Now, obviously the topic tonight is Alberta sovereignty, but before we get into the discussion on Alberta sovereignty, and bear with me for a second, I want to pay tribute, using the words of Mahatma Gandhi, to our former Prime Minister and the people that voted for him. What he said was, if an idiot is in power, then those who put him there are well represented. And to be clear, nobody in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Central and Northern BC voted for our former PM or our current PM. And I think many of you are aware that our current PM, although much smarter than our former PM, may be far worse than our former PM. Why? Because all you got to do is read his book entitled Values, and you will understand the sort of policies that he would like to implement. All right. Well, let's talk about sovereignty, and I want to take you back to 2003. In 2003, at the annual general meeting of the Provincial Conservative Party in Red Deer, I was having a private conversation with then Premier Klein. And I said to Ralph, yeah, give him a hand, a great guy. And I said to Ralph, Ralph, I think I've got a solution to fix the dysfunctional relationship between Alberta and Ottawa. And he said, you do? And I said, yeah, would you like to hear about it? He says, absolutely. So I said, well, Ralph, it's based on this question. Some of you may have heard it. This question. If you were the president or the prime minister of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? And I will always remember his response, because he smiled, he looked at me, and he said, to ask the question is to know the answer, of course not. And I said, well, I'm glad that you said that, because the corollary is, don't you think then you have an ethical and an economic responsibility to Albertans to fix this dysfunctional relationship? And he said, yeah, well, I guess I probably do. And I said, well, I'm working on a document, and when I've completed it, then I'd like to present it to you, and it really should be or will be the algorithm on how you can fix this dysfunctional relationship. And so for the next few months, I worked on the document. It was contributed to by constitutional lawyers like Jerry Shapur, many professionals and non-professionals, MLAs such as Ted Morton, federal MPs like Don Mazankowski, who's a friend of mine. And then I presented it to Ralph. It was entitled Alberta at the Crossroads, Status Quo, Refederation, Autonomy. In my mind at that time in 2003, I thought autonomy meant Alberta sovereignty. But nevertheless, we had a good discussion in August of 2003 about the concept. And the concept was leverage. What is the leverage that Alberta has in order to solve the imbalance in power between the federal government and the provincial government? And of course, there has been none to this date. As it's been stated by others, it is impossible to open and change the Constitution to satisfy Alberta's concerns. But there is one way to do it, and that is to have a referendum that is successful on Alberta's sovereignty. Right? Now let's consider what sovereignty actually means. It means self-governance without external interference. And I want you to understand sovereignty from the perspective of each one of you individually. You are a sovereign individual. You give up your sovereignty when you let others regulate you. You give up your sovereignty when you give your money through taxation for reasons that don't even make sense to you. What it means is that when you give up your sovereignty in this fashion, you no longer have the purchasing power to purchase the goods and services that you want for yourself and your family. And what Alberta's sovereignty will bring to you is a massive benefit, not just with respect to freedom, but with respect to prosperity. And the numbers are enormous. And I'm going to leave it to Jeff to talk about some of those financial benefits when it's his opportunity to speak to you. But let's look at and get an understanding of why we are in this mess now. And we need to go back in time. You'll recall, many of you, in September 1, 1905 is when Alberta was incorporated, along with Saskatchewan, was incorporated into Canada, thanks to the efforts of Sir Clifford Sifton. Sir Clifford Sifton was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier, and he was responsible for bringing Alberta and Saskatchewan into Confederation. September 1, 1905, to remind you. But it's what he said in 1904 at a presentation in Winnipeg to a large audience that is prescient. And these words are really important for you to understand because this explains why we are where we are now. And this is what he said, and I quote, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire." Well, think about that. Canadian patriots were the people living in the East. Alberta and Saskatchewan weren't involved yet. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies is Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to our prosperity. Now, where do you see Alberta and Saskatchewan fit into that? You don't. So we started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, and nothing has changed. We continue to be a colony, to be pillaged, plundered, and to have values thrust down our throat that we don't agree with. And here's where we are now as a result of that. Now, what's been the outcome? Well, along with equalization, the national energy policy, and various other confiscatory policies by the federal government, Over the years, we've contributed over $800 billion to Ottawa, for which we've not received 1 cent in return. And it's very important to understand why. And it's embodied in the National Energy Policy when Marc Lalonde, who was the author of the National Energy Policy in 1980, was asked, "Why did you introduce the National Energy Policy?" And we have the video of his response. And it was, "We could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada." Now that will never change. That attitude will never change. And you have to internalize that, because we will be subjugated forever unless we can get out from under that oppression. Now, if we look at more recent times, as the Premier has pointed out, in the last 12, 14 years, nearly $500 billion, $500 billion of planned investment in Alberta ceased. It didn't occur. Why? Because of federal regulations. And it's important to understand this. In fact, there was, interestingly enough, and this just came out the other day from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, they evaluated the loss that Alberta experiences as a result of not being able to market our oil and gas to an international market. And that amount is $26.5 billion per year, which would come into the Alberta economy had we had the ability to market our products, our oil and gas, to an international market. So these are the kinds of oppressive policies. And what about values? Well, how many people here are really keen about DEI and ESG? How many people here are keen about censorship? How many people here are keen about a central bank digital currency that will control every aspect of your life? Well, these are some of the values in Mr. Carney's book entitled Values. Those are his values. Now, let's look at the issue of property rights and think of it in terms of the gun legislation. The federal government wants to confiscate your guns, or at least the majority of them. And Jeff can speak eloquently about this from a constitutional perspective. But the reality is that as David Lametti, the former Minister of Justice in the Trudeau government, who will now have some position in the new federal government, has stated, Canadians do not have the right to own property. Internalize that. This is the kind of thing that we need to get out from under. Notwithstanding, let's look at health as another example of a problem here. The Canadian government has signed on to the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty. That has the ability, once again, to control your lives, perhaps even to a greater extent than you experienced during the COVID pandemic, or non-pandemic, as it were. Now, the Premier has said that we are not going to allow the World Health Organization dictate to us health policy. That's provincial jurisdiction. But the Premier needs to give her head a shake. Why? Because how are we funded? Well, we give $70 billion a year to the federal government, and they send us back about $27 billion to look after social transfers, infrastructure transfers, education transfers, and health transfers. So if the provincial government, any provincial government, is not compliant with federal regulation and federal dictates, guess what happens? The federal government withholds those transfer payments until the provincial government becomes compliant. So I can't believe that under the circumstances of Alberta not following federal health policy as dictated by the World Health Organization, I can't believe that the federal government wouldn't withhold transfer payments, and I can't believe that the Premier would continue to be non-compliant. So think about that, how the federal government controls us, just with that one example. Now let's look at economic growth. Of all the industrialized nations in the world, economic growth in Canada was the lowest. Well, what does that tell you about the way in which our government federally has managed things? I don't think anybody's very happy with the circumstances. But you know what? Part of the problem? Most people don't even realize it, do they? And part of our responsibility as a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational society is to educate people about these things, to educate people about the rationale and the merits of Alberta sovereignty. Now let's look at what the Premier has said recently. And I will say that she is a Premier that has stood up against the federal government, perhaps even more than any previous Premier. And she has made a number of demands. And she has said if those demands are not met, that will be a threat to national unity. Well, that can only mean one thing, right? It means Alberta leaves. Does she have the courage actually to follow through? Well, we'll find out. But we can help steel her spine. When we grow this membership to several 100,000 or 1 million or greater, she will not be able to ignore the movement. And at some point, she may well get in front of this movement. As Ralph Klein used to say, find a parade and get in front of it. Well, we'll see if that happens. She has publicly stated she's going to give these negotiations 6 months. Well, we'll see what happens there. She's talked about a number of demands. One of them is ending equalization. What does that require? It requires opening and changing the Constitution. How's she going to do that just by negotiating? She can't. It's not going to happen. There are so many constitutional changes that are required, it would take decades of negotiating to try and solve these problems. And right now, just so everybody's aware, the provincial government has some 18 lawsuits against the federal government. And how long do you think it's going to take? How much time do you think we have before Mr. Carney creates even more carnage than the former Prime Minister did? We don't have too much time. All right, so 6 months apparently is the timeline that she has talked about in terms of, well, I guess you could say Plan B. Maybe, just maybe, she might get in front of this. I don't really know. But let's look at what's happening in terms of the reality here. We know that we have a legal pathway out of this morass that we're in. And that is the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act was developed because after the 1995 Quebec secession referendum, the federal government posed the question, does a province have the right to unilaterally leave Canada? And they posed that question to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court came back with, no, you can't unilaterally do that, but if you follow this pathway, a province can legally leave. And what does it require? Simply that there be a clear question on leaving Canada and becoming a sovereign nation, and that there be a clear majority, and that there be appropriate negotiations with other interested parties, such as First Nations, such as other political parties and other perhaps interested groups. So this is the legal pathway. And so where are we at right now? Well, in May of 2022, the provincial government passed what is called the Citizens Initiative Act. The Citizens Initiative Act required for a constitutional change petition that there be 600,000 people that sign a petition for some constitutional change, such as Alberta sovereignty, and those signatures needed to be collected within 90 days. Well, if you think about that, that's virtually impossible to do. So we came across a workaround, and that workaround was actually really quite simple. I'm surprised that Mr. Kenney never thought of blocking us yet again, but he didn't. So this is what we came up with. We said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to collect the contact information of 600,000 people, and when we've got the contact information of 600,000 people, we will submit our petition question on sovereignty to Elections Alberta. Elections Alberta will certify it, and then we will send out the canvassers. But guess what? Now we know where to send the canvassers because we have the contact information of 600,000 people. Now, many of you are aware that Bill 54 that has been proposed by the UCP government reduces that threshold from 600,000 to 10% of the number of people who voted in the last election. So the new threshold is around 177,000. And to my understanding, we're already somewhat north of that. But I want you to think about this. I want you to think about this. Even with, say, 250,000 people, and I don't know what the exact number is, that have registered their intent or have signed a petition, there's a certain circle of people around that 177,000 or 200 or 250,000 people that signed the petition. There's a much larger circle around 800,000 or 900,000 people who have signed the petition, because what we're really after is 1.5 million people who will vote in favor of Alberta sovereignty. There's about 2.8 million eligible voters in the province of Alberta. Our target is at least 1.5 million who will vote in favor of the referendum. So at some point, our board of directors will make a decision as to when we launch the petition. But personally, I would like to see, and this will be a decision made by the board, not just by me, I would like to see the growth of the numbers of people who have registered for the petition to be of a sufficient magnitude that gives us confidence that when we launch the petition and the provincial government gets it and they hold the referendum, we have a guaranteed win on the referendum. I'm going to close with a question, and I want to show a hand. And it's the same question that I posed to Ralph. And there's a reason why I'm posting this question, and you'll find out after you answer it. All right. So the question is, if Alberta was already a sovereign country, would you want Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership? Raise your hands. Nobody raises your hands. The corollary then is you all have an obligation then to help us get other people to support Alberta sovereignty, to register their intent. And if every one of you gets 3 or 4 people, by the looks of this crowd, we'll have another 5,000 or 8,000 or 10,000 people who have registered their intent, and we will continue to grow this movement. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you all, thank you from the bottom of my cardiac surgical heart for all of your support and to listen to my ramblings this evening. Thank you so much.
Dr. Denis Modry. That's pretty incredible information. It's one of the reasons that I do what I do and go around and plug away day after day. You guys may talk to me at some point if you've registered. All of our volunteers here, I want to give an extended hand because to put something like this together takes a lot. So thank you to all of our volunteers. Our third speaker tonight is Mr. Jeffrey Rath. He is an astute lawyer and he is proud Albertan. He's well versed in the Constitution, the constitutional laws for Indigenous leaders, as well as all of the citizens here in Alberta. He is a general counsel for APP and has been a mastermind behind the movement. He's a very big supporter of Alberta Independence, and I would like to welcome Jeffrey Rath up to the stage.
Thank you so much. Look around, everybody. This is what too big to rig looks like. I am just so proud and so happy to be here tonight to share in the energy in this room. There's over 1,000 Albertans here tonight. And our kickoff town hall, our kickoff town hall for what's going to be the first of 60 town halls across the province this summer in support of Alberta freedom and Alberta independence. Now, I look around at all of our volunteers who are here working tonight. None of this would be happening without them. We got, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much. I guess some of you have heard that since Mark Carney was elected 2.5 weeks ago, we've now had over 15,000 new volunteers come forward, pledging to join our fight. I'd like everybody to think about that for a minute, because that's actually more volunteers than we have infantry in the entire Canadian Army. So, we're all very busy helping everybody get on board, helping to get people organized through, again, what we, are going to be 60 town halls across the province this summer. We're planning 2 massive door-knocking campaigns. We're going to want to knock on every door in this province at least twice. All 87 constituencies in this province. First of all, in support of the referendum petition, and I guess as you've heard from Dr. Modry today, as of today, and the latest number that I got from our good friend and colleague and CEO Mitch Sylvester, 240,000 people have pledged their support for an independence referendum in Alberta, which we hope to have happen this year. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of discussion around that. Some people say, oh, well, maybe we should wait until next year, whatever it is. Keep in mind, I'm a litigator. I like setting aggressive trial dates. I want to have all the planning in place. We want to be ready to go. And, in my view, there's no reason that, we can't have every Albertan organized and ready for a referendum in November of 2025. That is the goal that we're working towards. We're currently at 240,000 pledges. By the end of May, we want to be over 400,000 pledges. By the end of June, we want to be easily over 600,000 pledges. And our goal is by the end of the town hall campaign and the door knocking campaign this summer, by September, we want to be at least at 1 million pledges for people that are going to be voting in favor of Alberta independence. So with some of the organizational things out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about why it is that all of us believe in what we're doing so strongly and why we're on this road. All of us have lived our lives in this province as proud Albertans and are just sick and tired of seeing the wealth of this province being stolen from us to feed the egos of politicians in Quebec who do not want our dirty oil passing through their province. They're quite happy to take our dirty money that's generated by the oil, but they don't want us to prosper, they don't want our industries to prosper, and they want to regulate every single aspect of our lives, including what firearms we're allowed to own, what type of cars we're supposed to drive, all the rest of it. I mean, literally at some point, if I recall, under the lunacy of the Trudeau regime, they were literally talking about getting rid of all gas-powered vehicles by 2035. I mean, how the hell does anybody get through an Alberta winter at minus 40, in an electric vehicle when they've got to drive, 150 or 250 kilometers to and from a job site? It doesn't work. But of course, these are policies that are made by people that don't work for a living, don't understand people who work for a living, and do not give a damn about people who work for a living. We are being governed by a bunch of climate lunatics who engage in the same level of magical thinking as the ancient Mayans that led to the end of their civilization. These people literally believe that by cutting out the hearts of Alberta men and women working to feed their families, by literally cutting out their hearts with excessive taxation, that they can change the weather. I mean, has anybody heard anything so stupid? But these are the people that are governing us. And then, of course, when we saw the start of the great phony tariff war that Justin Trudeau kicked off in order to get Marxist Carney elected, right? We saw Doug Ford jumping up and down and turning red in the face and saying, to fight these tariffs, we're going to shut off Alberta oil. And then people pointed out, okay, jackass, do you understand that your Ontario oil from Alberta leaves Alberta on Enbridge Line 5, goes down into the United States, and then back up into Ontario through Line 9? So when you're proposing cutting off Alberta oil to the United States, you're literally talking about cutting off Alberta oil to Eastern Canada. Right? I mean, these are the types of idiots that purport to want to govern us. And quite frankly, I mean, that is the problem, with this so-called federal system that we work under. You notice that Doug Ford never said, hey, I'm going to teach President Trump a lesson on the integration of the North American auto industry. I'm going to shut down parts plants in Ontario for a week and bring North American production to a halt. Did we ever hear that suggestion? Oh, no. We're going to shut off Alberta oil. Oh, I can't shut off Alberta oil? Okay, then I'm going to kick Saskatchewan in the crotch, and I'm going to shut down all their potash production and teach American farmers a lesson by killing all their crops by not supplying them with fertilizer. I mean, this is the level of sheer stupidity that we are being governed with by people from Ontario and politicians from Quebec. The other thing that was hilarious was the gibbering Gibault, the climate Nazi that was running carbon, policy for Trudeau, was shocked to find out that there wasn't an east-west pipeline in Canada that would supply Alberta oil to Eastern Canada, and that he couldn't cut off oil to the United States. At which point, after 10 years of literally trying to destroy the Alberta economy, Gibault woke up to the idea that maybe we need to have an east-west pipeline. You think? right? This is the foolishness that we deal with. And then the problem we have is that because of the federal structure and the nature of federalism, it even infects, our locally elected MPs, and it infects our provincial politics. Let's look at Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney. I know, we all love Jason Kenney. He called me a traitorous kook a couple of weeks ago. I had to laugh. So anyway, look at Jason Kenney. Why do you think he imposed all of those obnoxious, stupid COVID policies that he imposed on us? Right? Why did he want to tell us how many friends we could have, right? Shut down our schools so that, while leaving the bars, casinos, and strip clubs open, so our 18-year-old sons and daughters, couldn't go to high school, but they could go to the bars, the casinos, and the strip clubs. I mean, this was the idiocy of Jason Kenney in government, right? And why was he that foolish, and why was he enacting all of these harmful policies that were dictated to him by Justin Trudeau? Why was Jason Kenney, even though he was elected as a Conservative, governing like a Trudeau Liberal? Because he has federal aspirations to run for federal office. Right? So you can't get elected as a Prime Minister of Canada, unless you can pander to the people in Ontario who think, that freedom is a bad word. Everybody should be locked in their homes when the government decides to lock us in our homes. We should be treated like children on a regular basis, etc., etc. Kenney knows that to get elected in Eastern Canada, you've got to be able to telegraph that form of mentality to people because they like to be treated like children, and that's what they expect from their leaders, right? So that's why we suffered what we're suffering. Look at Pierre Poilievre. He was running a national campaign, not as a Conservative, but as a Trudeau Liberal. He would not say that he was opposed to Alberta transfer payments going to Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes, claims to be from Alberta, right? And here he is now because, of course, he couldn't get reelected in Ottawa, which is really where he belongs. He's now coming to run in Battle River Crowfoot, and he's still, I double dog dare him, Pierre, I have a slogan for you. The slogan is, no more Alberta tax dollars for Quebec, and a dairy cow and micro dairy in every Alberta barn that wants one. I dare you to adopt that as a slogan and then see how well that plays in Ontario and Quebec. Right? And that's the problem with the structure of Canadian federalism in a nutshell. The needs and aspirations of people in Quebec and Ontario are so completely divorced from the needs and aspirations and ambitions of people in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where we actually work for a living, that their governance of us is oppressive, is an existential threat to us, and makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. On that same note, if you think about, the things that we've been suffering under the Trudeau government, I mean, every time he would wake up, he would have some dream about, we don't know whether he was fetishizing and having wet dreams or whether he was actually scared of guns, right? You're never sure with Justin what actually drives him. But every time he would turn around, he'd come up with a new list of Alberta property that he wanted to confiscate from us. And let's be clear, federal gun confiscation laws in Alberta are patently illegal and violate Section 9213 of the Constitution Act 1867, which says that property and civil rights in a province are within the exclusive domain of the provincial government, not the federal government. So, if Justin Trudeau said, well, gun crime's a problem, I'm now going to increase, the penalties for assault with a firearm or armed robbery or whatever to life in prison with no possibility of parole, with most of us wouldn't have a problem with, right? that would be within his purview within the Constitutional Order of Canada. But to simply decide and declare that people's personal property in the province of Alberta is now illegal and subject to federal confiscation goes so far beyond the Constitutional Order of Canada as to, in my mind, coupled with the comments of idiots like David Modry, who says that property rights don't exist in Canada, constitutes a constitutional crisis which should in and of itself drive Alberta out of Canada. And of course, some of you have heard me say this. Some of you have heard me say this before, and that is, we don't actually have to leave Canada anymore. In the last election, Ontario and Quebec actually voted to separate when they elected Mark Carney, right? And now all we are doing is giving effect to their choice to not be, joined with Alberta anymore. And it's now our business over the next 6 to 12 months to give effect to getting Alberta the hell out of Canada. Now, I don't want to spend the entire evening, talking about grievances and federal stupidity or cupidity or corruption. I mean, we could be here until midnight, okay? So what I'd like to do now is focus on the economic message that I would like all of us to share with our fellow Albertans. Everybody here, there's 1,000 people here. I have a challenge for each and every one of you that are cheering and applauding tonight. I'd like every one of you to sign up 20 friends, 20 family members. Get them to go to APP, sign up for the petition. We have 1,000 people here tonight, 20 each, that'll give us another, that'll give us another 20,000. And then so on. And let's just keep this going. It's important that we do that. But while we're focused on, the economic message that we have to share, I want everybody to focus on how much better off Alberta is going to be when we are completely free of all forms of federal taxation. So no more federal, I'm going to go through the list. No more federal income tax. No more carbon tax, either personal or industrial, because we all know that Mark Carney's carbon tax holiday is going to end as soon as the throne speech is over this July, and our fuel prices are going to go back to $1.80 a liter, right? But, because of course, if you read his book, as Denis points out, that's what he actually believes, not actually giving working Albertans a break. We all know he only did that to get elected. So there'll be no more carbon tax. There'll be no more federal excise tax or fuel tax. No more federal corporate taxes. No more federal capital gains tax. No more having CRA presuming to be your partner in business, telling you, when you should be collecting receivables from your clients, how you should be dealing with your clients, how you should be managing your affairs. And, and we'll go back to a sensible system where people are actually taxed on money that they've actually brought in, as opposed to receivables on their books or inventory or any of the other things that CRA has been sneaking into people's lives over the last 5 years to make the lives of small business people and business owners in Alberta completely miserable, right? And I want people to focus, and I think Denis Modry, speaks to this, is if you look at the average salary of the average Albertan, which, they pegged at $78,000 a year, if you take all of the federal taxes, the cost of all of the federal regulations, all of the costs that are piled on the average working man or woman in this province, the average person's actual spending power from that $78,000 is probably closer to $31,000 to $35,000. It's ridiculous what they're doing to us. They are intentionally keeping us in poverty. They are intentionally making people's lives miserable because, of course, to quote Klaus Schwab and David Modry, you will own nothing and be happy. Right? This is what they're trying. This is literally what they're trying to do to us. But in a new Alberta tax in a new Alberta tax regime where we have a 10% flat tax on income, a 10% flat tax, on corporations, a doubling of our oil and gas output so that the entire economy in this province is thriving, we could easily afford those tax levels, and the average take-home pay of the person making $78,000 a year would increase from $31,000 to $35,000 to $65,000 to $70,000. Think about that. So when you vote yes to that question, do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? What you're really doing is voting yourself, depending on your tax bracket, between a 30 to 50% pay raise. And my question for everybody is, in the context of, remember that show, this shows me how old I am now, but there was a show when I was a kid called The Courtship of Eddie's Father, right? So, let's call it The Courtship of Danielle Smith, with Mark Carney coming to Alberta with his little boxes of chocolates and making sweet little offers to her about, I could make your life really better. I can't give you any pipelines, but I'll make vague promises as to energy mega projects that don't burn fossil fuels. Maybe I'll give you a couple million or a couple billion of your own dollars back to build hydrogen plants like the ones they have in Newfoundland, or whatever other stupid things Carney thinks he can bring to the table to entice Danielle Smith into selling out her own citizens, right? But on a going forward basis, what everybody has to understand, there isn't a goddamn thing, excuse my language, there is not a thing that Mark Carney can offer Alberta that is more valuable than a complete end to all federal regulation and all federal taxation in the province of Alberta. And before I close, I'd like to address some of the, some of the sillier arguments that are being brought up by, by the forces of federalism, right? With regard to, Alberta not being able to go it alone. My favorite one, though, recently was, well, do you realize that if you leave Canada, you won't get any more federal health transfers? Oh my goodness, you mean you're not going to give us any more of our money back? And you mean that we're not going to have to come to you on bended knee anymore, begging you for money to pay for our doctors, to pay for our nurses, to pay for our schools, to pay for our roads, because you're sending, like, literally taking $70 billion out of Alberta, running it through a grotesquely bloated federal bureaucracy that has doubled in size since the advent of the Trudeau Liberals. So you run it through this grossly bloated bureaucracy, then take $40 billion off the top and sprinkle it out, $15 billion to Quebec, and the rest of it spread between bullshit federal projects in the Maritimes, Ontario, or wherever. God knows Albertans should be paying for Justin Trudeau's electric choo-choo train between Toronto and Montreal. Right? So by the time, all the money is doled out and we get our paltry 27 to 30 billion a year back, including the 3 billion a year at Alberta pensioners, Alberta is way in the hole. And if we had that extra 40 billion a year, let's face it, all of the issues in this province could literally be solved overnight. I know there's Aboriginal people in this province that are concerned about this project. I say to them, why do you want $15 billion a year to go to Quebec when that money could stay in Alberta to negotiate a constitutionalized resource revenue sharing agreement with you that would easily see your revenues triple? That's what this means. I don't understand people that are so attached to Quebec that they want to keep sending them $15 billion a year of our money so that Quebec can continue to run surplus budgets while thumbing their nose at Albertans and refusing Alberta pipelines to the east, right? And while Alberta is literally having to borrow money to pay for our doctors, to pay for our nurses, to pay for our teachers, to pay for our roads, to pay for our infrastructure and society, so that we as Albertans can continue to bribe Quebec to stay in Confederation because politicians in Ontario really need them there to keep in power so that they can keep lording it over us. Makes no sense. So, in conclusion, I want everybody really to focus on the benefits of what we're proposing. Again, what we are proposing and what we are offering through Independence are benefits far beyond anything that we could ever achieve by remaining in Canada and receiving whatever little inducements Mark Carney can offer to Danielle, over their next 6-month courtship. So again, everyone, I'm so proud of all of you here tonight. I'm just so excited by all the energy in the room tonight. And I just want to say thank you so much and welcome to a free and independent Alberta.
Jeffrey Rath, everybody. I was just notified that I Am Albertan is actually going to donate 100% of the proceeds tonight. Thank you, Kate. It's amazing volunteers like Kate and everybody standing in the back that make these events possible. And like Jeff said, 15,000 new volunteers in the last couple of weeks. We have probably not gotten to everybody on that list because there's only a few of us that are trying to get a hold of everyone. So just know that there will be some emails coming out as to what you guys can help with. Definitely door knocking. Like Jeff said, getting people to come out to events, getting 20 more people. We can't do this alone. And when I first started this movement, we had 8 people come to one of our meetings. Look at the attendance tonight. So once again, thank you to all of you for coming out. Our final speaker for the evening needs no introduction either. I've had the pleasure of working with this man for the last 1.5 years. He has everyone's best interests at heart. He's an owner of a business in Bonnyville, Alberta. He's a UCP chair. He's our current CEO of Alberta Prosperity Project. He is a man of many, many hats. One of the things that is amazing about Mitch is the integrity that he holds, and he holds it for every single person. It's all about the people. It's not about an agenda. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Mitch Sylvester.
Well, you have to attend halls with 6 people in them after a 6-hour drive to appreciate this. I'm going to tell you that right now. I want everybody to be aware of how hard this fight is going to be. This is going. Nicole, would you give me my clicker? Sorry. This is going to be the fight of our lives. I honestly think that we're not going to have another chance to do it either. So please be aware, we're all in. This is supposed to be nonpartisan, and everybody understand that we need the party in power to actually get us this referendum and to put it into effect. Now, I don't know who the party in power is in Alberta right now, but if I was nonpartisan, I'd be buying memberships to that party to absolutely make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. I want you to understand something else that we've learned over and over and over again. Politicians will not save us. I'm afraid to thank Mr. Carney for all of this, but I will thank him only if we win. Will it be worth, will it be what we actually need? Because we knew going in that Mr. Poilievre, even had he won, we would be back at this spot in 2 or 3 years when we realized that nothing's actually going to change. So this is my favorite group of people, or one of my favorite groups of people. This is my CA board. This is the people that we bring to the AGM last year. We bring more people to the AGM 3 years in a row than any CA in Alberta. And I will share with you that this is what we need to do. This is the kind of commitment that we're going to need from each and every one of you. I mean, understand they're going to attack us. Your neighbors are going to be afraid to commit. You understand that they get their news from the CBC. We get our news from other places. We understand things they don't understand. You're going to be vilified. You're going to be attacked. I know I'm going to be attacked. My business is going to be attacked, and it's going to be a war. Because what's at stake is the richest piece of real estate in the world. And they're not just going to hand it over to us. They're not just going to say, well, here you go, Alberta. You decided to have a referendum on independence. You voted that way. And we're going to give up 1.3 trillion barrels of oil and everything that comes with it. So this is going to be a dogfight. It's not going to be easy. And I just want to prepare everybody to do the work that's required to make this to go over the top. Because like I said, I don't believe that if we lose this, we'll ever get another chance to do it. So say again, we're all in. Mr. Trudeau said, and if you want to believe, said, I want to be sure that you all understand how big this problem is. Our democracy is at stake here. Our democracy is literally at stake here. This is not only about just a free Alberta. This is about democracy versus socialism or communism, however you want to put the agenda that they have. We're looking at a major culture shift from what we have been expected to live, the life we've been expected to live, to the life that we're going to be living, moving into the very near future. Mr. Trudeau said, there is no core identity to mainstream in Canada. Okay. And consequently, that makes us the first post-national state. So you understand what a post-national state is. No borders, mass immigration. We become a state of the world, the first one. So they're saying that we have no identity. And I kind of disagree with that. We'll go back to this comment that Denis alluded to a little bit earlier. But my part of this comment is I want to share with you who those people were that broke the West. My grandfather, many people's grandfather in this room, they came here on the promise of land that if they broke it by hand, they could end up with a quarter section. They were cutting trees, they were pulling stumps. They left everything that they valued behind back home, and they took a chance on coming here. And we're asking you to do the same thing. We're asking you to take a chance on this because we think that you will be much better off than you were before. Here's where the problem started. Denis also alluded to this. In 1980, they decided that Alberta was too rich. You see, the problem was they expected us to be farmers and sharecroppers, but they didn't expect the oil. The oil is what threw a wrench in their gears, because all of a sudden Alberta became very, very rich. Alberta was threatened to be the center of the universe in Canada, and they didn't want that. So that's what they, so that in that year, right here, Mark Lalonde said, 1980, we have to stop Alberta from being the center of Canada. So that was about the same time the transfer payments came into effect. So the idea of a transfer payment is to take money out of Alberta, so Alberta will not be rich, and they will be richer, of course. This is all about a money conversation, actually. This conversation is all about money. So don't ever for 1 minute believe that it's about anything else. Here's what Alberta contributes compared to everything else. Just so you're not sure, if you're not sure of this is very clear. This is our contributions to the rest of Canada compared to what everybody else gets. And that's the equalization payment schedule for this year. Okay, did you notice that number for Quebec? 13.6 billion, 4.7 billion for Manitoba, and the Maritimes get all kinds of transfer payments. That has to end. Understand that Quebec's biggest industry is not in their balance sheet. Hydro-Quebec is their biggest industry. They don't include it so that they can get this $14 billion a year in transfer payments. Now, we also understand that that's never been a fair equation, but it's totally designed to work the way it's working. Do not think for 1 minute that they don't understand what they're doing. Pension plan. There you go. We contribute $53.6 billion to pension plans, so I'm going to clear pension plan up for you. I've done about 80 town halls on pension plans, so I'm just going to make you understand that you're not going to lose your pension. CPP owes you that money. If you are going to move to Florida, they would have to pay your pension. So this is how pension plan actually works. We pay $9 billion a year. We collect $6 billion. We have a $3 billion overage. The CPP actually contract that the government made at the time when it was initiated said that any overage would go into a pile for the province that contributed it. So for Alberta, that number today with interest is probably 335 billion plus another 6 billion plus interest for 2 years on that number. So 370, 380 billion dollars. Now I had the Premier in Bonnyville last Thursday night and I said, you don't need a referendum to call the pension back. Why don't you call the pension back? She didn't answer. I said, no, at least why don't you take them to court and get the number? Because they've missed 4 deadlines on the number. All right, they missed 4 deadlines on the number. They've also got that number in their balance sheet. So that 365 billion is an asset of Canada, not an asset of Alberta. So is anybody or is everybody in the room convinced that that money is still there? So that's my problem with that as well. We hear that they've invested it in roads in India, all the rest of that. When Mr. Carney came in, he asked that he could manage $50 billion of that fund, which I'm not sure how that ended up. But the commission on that management fee for managing $50 billion is $750 million a year. All right, so just so you don't forget, lest we forget what happened in the last 10 years, COVID's not in this slide, but COVID is one of the very big things that happened in the last 10 years, so I just want everybody to be aware of that. I'm aware of it as well. Demand for oil is going up every year. We've got a problem. They want to shut our oil patch down. They want to put a cap on carbon. So I want you to understand what the cap on carbon means. The cap on carbon means they're going to halve our production. They're going to cut our production in half. So just understand where all the money to run all these programs and everything comes from. If they cut our production in half, it's going to be the biggest recession Alberta's ever seen. We will have to, well, Bonnyville in 2014, when Trudeau came into power, we lost 8,000 to 10,000 jobs in our area. All the people went back to Newfoundland and all the rest of that stuff. Housing prices went down 60%, 50%. Nobody had work. My boys are both, I had 2 boys working in the oil patch. They're making big wages. They never worked for 2 full years. And so what I'm saying to you is it will have an impact on us that we won't recover from. So just understand, Jeff alluded to it, the whole purpose of this is to make us poorer. There's no other reason. They make themselves richer, us poorer, and that's their goal. So that's why I want you to understand that we're all in here because they're trying to break us, they're trying to hurt us. There's absolutely no question in my mind. The canceled projects do the same thing. What about your kids? What about your grandkids? If they shut down the oil patch, that's the largest industry in Canada. People around the world think we're absolutely insane for putting up with this. The Premier said it at my town hall. People around the world think we're nuts. How can you have all that and not take advantage of it? In my lifetime, and I've been around a little while, find it incomprehensible to believe, I can't believe that our federal government would attack our biggest industry or attack a province. And if you look at those numbers, you understand who they're attacking. They're attacking us because it goes back to screw the West, we'll take the rest, because they don't need us, because we're basically insignificant as far as they're concerned. So we have to make ourselves significant, and that's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take each and every one of us to actually try hard, like very, very hard. Try at least as hard as us in order to get that to happen, because we can't do it by ourselves. When Mr. Carney won the election, we were onboarding 4,000 to 5,000 people an hour. Okay, so just understand that. But now, it's slowed down a little bit, and it's a long ways from 240,000 to 1 million. Because I've been on the road for a long time, and I understand how hard it is to get people signed up and for people to pledge. And the other thing, please, don't be afraid to pledge, because if you do not pledge, we don't know where to find you. And if you don't take a chance and put yourself on a list, we will never find you. And that's been the problem with most of this stuff. People are afraid, because of COVID, to put their names on a list. You're going to be on a really big list. You'll be okay. They can't deal with this list. This is a really big list. So please talk to your friends and get them to put their name on this list so we can find you. Okay, they canceled this project in Prince Rupert. I go to Prince Rupert fishing every year. The $11 billion natural gas project, because it wasn't in our business plan to sell natural gas to Germany and Japan and Greece. Trillions of dollars we lost. $1 trillions of dollars that our people could have had, jobs that we could have had, that they said, no, it's not in their best interest. I ask you a question. If that was a Quebec thing, do you think that that plant would have been built? Yes. 100%. All right. That's not all they're doing. Bill C-69, Blockstown. The tanker ban's the one I find most interesting. You know, they got tankers running up the St. Lawrence, and that's okay, but they can't have tankers going down the West Coast. Carbon tax, the most amazing thing in the world. They're attacking us based on carbon, and carbon is part of the cycle of life. Don't believe that. Here's one of the most amazing things as well, C-293. Does anybody understand what that is? C-293 is a bill that they're going to pass that in case there's an emergency, any kind of emergency that they claim is an emergency, that they will be able to go to your farm and seize your land and your herd. And that's legitimate. That's actually going through right now. It's a private member's bill, so they didn't even stop it through the prorogation of power. So here's the taxes that we pay. I take great pleasure in reading this list, just so you understand how unreasonable they are. Carbon tax, personal tax, corporate tax, goods and services tax, excise tax, fuel excise tax, alcohol, tobacco tax, cannabis tax, excise duties, custom duties, air traveler security charge, luxury tax, provincial territorial tax, capital gain, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, and business tax, and estate tax that's not on the list. Estate tax is 50% of capital gains or 65% of capital gains. So just understand how unreasonable that is. Everybody says, oh, the tariffs are the problem. The tariffs are 25%. That's at least that or more. And that's what our government is putting on us. So when Jeff says that you can save $25,000 to $30,000 a year based on a $80,000 income, that's where it all is. It's all right there. Oh, this is the one I find absolutely amazing. Did you know that we put a tariff on Chinese electrical cars? Okay, so do you know what the Chinese did? They tariffed our canola and our peas to 100%. So what's the cash crops in Alberta? In Bonnyville, canola and peas are 50% of the crop. So our government absolutely understands that. So who the hell has ever heard of a Chinese electrical car? Does anybody know what it is? I have no idea what it is. But they did this to hurt our producers. They're conscious. I was at the AGM, if you were there, and our agriculture minister said they do not know what they're doing. And then I got up on stage, I said, they absolutely know what they're doing. They for sure understand that. They get it, or they wouldn't do it. Censorship, let's talk about censorship for a minute. Just understand this. Another thing that I never ever thought I'd see in my life. Censorship means, to me, and here's the problem with censorship, you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't get the information, how are you ever going to know it? See, that's the way out of it. So you're not even sure, you're not even aware that you're being censored. And that's the funny part about the whole deal. So we have to make sure that we're not being censored by voting these people out of office and getting away from them. Because they have absolutely no qualms on controlling the information. And if they control the information, then they're controlling you. All right, here's my favorite thing. Everybody's been alluding to Mr. Carney's book. Let me read something to you. In his book, Values, Mr. Carney claims that the Western society is morally rotten and that it has been corrupted by capitalism, which brought about a climate emergency. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedoms, industry and corporate funding. Assets will be stranded, used gasoline cars will be unsaleable, inefficient properties will be unrentable. He promises socialism. This gentleman has been World Economic Forum royalty from the very, very beginning. We're not confused about who he is, but yet we put him back in power. Whether that happened legitimately or not is not my place to say. So we know what he's going to do, digital ID, social credit score, all the rest of this stuff. Here's one of the big problems. Oh, sorry. Okay, so I want you to see the contrast in these two slides. The first slide is this. All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can be ever used to command the party. So this is a communist version of that. So contrast that with American version from a democracy. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state and the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So that right there is the stark vision of what's actually happening here. We have to see that they're taking our guns away. Mr. Carney's come and he said in French language debate, and I understand that all guns are going to be confiscated. The confiscation program is on, is going to happen, whether we like it or not. Now I just want you to understand how that looks. They're going to make a criminal out of you, first of all, because they're going to ask for your guns back. And if you don't give your guns back, then of course, because you're a criminal, they'll be able to come to your house and knock your door down. In the middle of the night, any which way they can. And it's not going to be your neighborhood cop, it's going to be a SWAT team. They're not going to want to get shot. There's absolutely no way. They're even talking about banning long-range, accurate bolt-action rifles, which basically is every hunting rifle. And that's why they don't, people... The other part of the transnational state is immigration. There's no problem with immigration. Uncontrolled immigration is the problem. So uncontrolled immigration has caused us a lot of problems.
2 million a year, by the way.
Yeah, it's 2 million a year. That's like putting basically a new Edmonton in Canada every year. So how do you accommodate the infrastructure for that? It's very hard, it's almost impossible. All right, here we go. If you really want change, threaten to leave and mean it. So I have a question for you. I have a question for you. I asked this in Bonnyville. This is my closing question. Here it is. Do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? Yes or no? I want a picture of what Calgary looks like. I want everybody that agrees with that to stand up for me, please. Okay, that's going to be for the paper. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mitch Sylvester, everybody. Let's give him another round of applause. I hope everybody here has enjoyed everything that's been said this evening. I hope all of you in this room are also proud Albertans. We're not mean. We're not trying to take things away from anybody. We're trying to bring better here. That's what we want. That's what we need. Tired am I of trying to struggle where my kids or my family or my grandparents have nothing. I want to bring back a better Alberta. We have the opportunity to do this. And I invite each and every one of you to walk beside us, behind us, to the side of us, because a movement like this will come in big numbers. And we need all of you. Not one of you, but all of you. So I want to thank again each of you for being here, and I'm going to invite back up to the stage Mitch Sylvester, Denis Modry, and Jeff Rath. Daryl, you have a few...
My name is Mike LaRusso. Some of you might actually know me, but my question is mainly for Jeff. So I believe in Alberta independence to a point, but I believe it has to be followed by statehood in years down the road to be protected from evil oligarchies like Ottawa.
Remember what I said? Thank you. Get to the question.
My question is, do you believe that statehood is a possibility if there is a pathway to do it successfully and have more benefits for Alberta?
Of course it's a possibility, but this is a democratic process. So what I always tell everybody, the first step in the process is getting Alberta the hell out of Canada. Right? That's step one.
Okay.
And then if you can convince your fellow Albertans that they want to become subject to the IRS instead of CRA, you fill your boots.
Okay, next question.
Well, first, there's no more IRS. That was disbanded by Donald Trump. It's now the Treasury. So my question is this. I do go for separation, but I see in your presentation a lot of references to a republic as well. And you just basically answered that question. It's a step-by-step process. The longevity that will take if we do go to statehood, it could be years. So my question is, are you advocating for a republic, or are you advocating for independence regardless of a republic?
No, we're advocating for immediate independence from Canada, full stop, period. Okay?
Next question.
And the form of government that will follow independence will be the subject of a constitutional convention in this province, where everybody in the province will have a say on the form of government. We're not dictating that. I personally prefer something closer to the American model, with a bicameral legislature, an end to the Westminster system of governance, right, where we have elected dictators for 5 years, that we have an elected Senate in the province based on the regions of the province to protect the regions from the cities, and so on. So, but again, those are my views. There's various draft constitutions that are circulating. There'll be a constitutional convention, and the people will decide how we want to be governed.
Remember, it's a question.
Okay, that's just a follow-up here, because I totally agree with you.
Before you ask the question, I want to add a comment.
Sure.
Okay, so there are many people in Alberta who relish the idea of Alberta sovereignty, but they want to remain part of the Commonwealth. Okay? That's important to understand. Listen to me. There are 56 Commonwealth countries. 36 of them are constitutional republics based on the kind of governance in the United States. So it's important to understand that as Jeff said, there will be a constitutional conference after Alberta becomes a sovereign nation to determine the form of government. But we are not in a position to say which form of government is going to emerge as a result of this. There's another consideration, the Swiss model, which is direct democracy. And there's a lot of merit in that kind of governance as well. So don't jump on the bandwagon one or another just yet, because this will be subject, and you will all have an opportunity to weigh in a constitutional conference.
Okay, just a final follow-up. The reason why I'm asking this is, according to the Articles of Confederation, Article 11 says that Canada already is ceded to the Union and the United States, which predates the actual republical law, which is an actual republic. Right? So from a point of history, prior to the Transcontinental Railroad, we were already, according to that document, part of America.
Well, I don't know that we agree, and certainly in all of our discussions with the United States, they're very clear on the fact that what we're seeking is an independent Alberta, not Alberta statehood at this point. That's a step down the road.
My name is Dean Scubas. My question is, you look around the room, the age demographic of the people here aren't necessarily ones that we've got to convince. What's the plan for getting the younger people in Alberta on board? I think that's the ones that are going to sway our vote.
Well, the plan as far as we're concerned is they're going to understand the money. That's what's going to be our focus. We're going to explain to them that they will actually have the opportunity to buy a house at some point. They're actually going to have the opportunity to actually earn a living and get ahead. Because I can share with you the contrast of when I was a young man coming out of high school. I had friends that could buy houses, and nobody went, "Oh my God, you bought a house as a 19-year-old." But today, that's almost impossible. When we take the taxes out of the system, what's going to happen is it's going to allow our children and our grandchildren to be able to have more income, to be able to afford more things, and to actually be able to get ahead. As it stands right now, I have kids that are making $60,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year.
Yeah, if we could be quiet at the back. I love the chatter. It's best outside. So we need quiet like the presentation is happening. All that chit-chat is distracting from very important information, so shut up. Thank you.
So basically what we're going to do is we're going to explain the money to the young people, and I've done it multiple times. I've talked to people like before I get into these halls, and even people that voted NDP their whole life, and they get it, and it means a lot to them. An extra, you know, if you're two wages, an extra $15,000 to $20,000 per wage per year is a life-changing event. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to the kids about money.
One of the other things that we're going to do, tonight's event has been recorded, and we are going to have some links so that you can pass it out to your friends, the young people, because as a mom of young children and a family with young children, these events are very hard to come to for most people. Not because they can't come, but because they're distracted with other things and they just can't get here. And we have to respect that too, because families and young moms and young fathers, that's their life. Those kids are their life, and we have to remember we might have to do this work for them, and that's okay. I'm here, you're here, and we can do this.
Okay, excellent. Here we go.
Good evening. My name's Ken Yonke. Hopefully a green light friend to everyone in this room. I'd like to ask two questions. First, we wake up on December 1st, and good Lord, we are now sovereign Alberta. Thank you. What is our currency? And the fact that we have to consider is we would be landlocked. So we've known, all of us in this room, for 70 years, 100 years, our trading partners weren't to the east. They're obviously to the south. So any one of you, can you give us your vision as to how we have treaties and trade north and south?
Certainly. The first thing is, in our meetings and contacts with the United States, we're pretty clear on three things. One, there is clear support from the United States of America for Alberta self-determination. Two, there is clear support from the United States of America for the United States to recognize Alberta as an independent country immediately following a referendum vote. Three, that immediately following a referendum vote, that the United States will be prepared to enter into a free trade agreement with Alberta with zero tariffs on either side of the border on all goods and services in a common market with Alberta. Right? In the context of that common market, it is likely we would be using the US dollar initially. We have bankers and finance people that we're working with. One of the things that we were talking about at one of our meetings today is immediately having put in place credit swaps that would provide Alberta with effectively a $500 billion line of credit that would allow us to negotiate with Ottawa from a position of strength nation to nation in terms of getting out of the relationship that we're currently in, right? All of these things are underway. Obviously, a currency plan, we're thinking currently the US dollar, but and an Alberta dollar based on the resource wealth of this province that would not be fiat currency. But that being said, we obviously have to have currency plans in place, because the day Alberta declares its independence, the Canadian dollar will trade on par with the Polish zloty.
Okay, next question.
So I'm going to add to this. So when Jeff and I were in Washington speaking with the State Department, one of the proposals was, because of what Jeff just said, that the Canadian dollar will tank when Alberta has a successful sovereignty referendum, a request was made that every Alberta citizen on that day, okay, not after that day, but at that day, everybody who's an Alberta citizen at that time will have their, and this is a request, we don't have approval for anything like this, but the request is that every Canadian dollar owned by you will be converted at par to the US dollar. Okay? Now, that's a request. That's not an in the bag. That's subject to subsequent negotiations. But we believe that it would be a significant selling point to convince Albertans to support Alberta sovereignty. The second thing I want to make mention of is you brought up the issue of being landlocked. We're not landlocked. We're policy locked. And as Jeff well knows, and he just didn't say it, but sections 124 and 125 in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea requires that countries that are purportedly landlocked have access to tidewater and that they have transit through other countries. And this is an example of what Switzerland has right now. It's also a landlocked country, but it has no problem getting its products to market. And the other thing to say about this is if we were dealing with an intransigent Canada or British Columbia that didn't want to cooperate with us, well, we're not without clout. At the very least, we could impose significant tariffs on everything transferring east to west and west to east, or we could block it altogether. But remember, at this time, 90% of our trade goes south. Now, one of the questions that in support that we want from the U.S. is to help us deal with any intransigence that may come from the federal government or other forms of government. So, for example, let's say that we couldn't get our pension money back. Well, what could the U.S. do? Well, the U.S. could increase tariffs to maybe 200% on the rest of the country. How would that work? So the point is that we're not without clout. And the important thing is we have tremendous support from the largest, richest, most free country in the world right now, and that's the United States. And you got to think about that support. Now, all of this is going to be subject to future negotiations. And before I go on, I don't want to go on anymore on this subject. Jeff, you might want to comment on what's coming up next with the U.S. State Department.
Well, I mean, as far as it goes, we've had preliminary meetings. We're planning additional meetings for our delegation to Washington group. But I guess as we all know, President Trump right now is busy trying to stop Pakistan and India from nuking one another, trying to shut down a little war between Russia and Ukraine, trying to deal with things in the Middle East. So what they've told us, and then on top of it, the Secretary of State has now been given an extra job, which is National Security Advisor. So they're pretty busy, but they are briefed to the highest level, including the Oval Office, on what we are doing. They are very supportive, and we have a strong ally in the United States of America with regard to Alberta Independence.
Okay, let's go to the next question.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I wanted to ask, for messaging with young people, Alex Epstein is great for that, and Jordan Peterson has tremendous reach amongst youth. Have you reached out to either of them to help with the movement?
Thank you.
You know, 2 weeks ago, this wasn't a movement. So just understand how fast this happened. So we're all overdoing all of that. We're just trying to recover from the shock of onboarding 160,000 people. But we're catching up. So this week and next week, we're going to focus on messaging and getting to the young people. Actually, what we're trying to do also is trying to raise large amounts of money so we can get on websites and emails and all manner of communications at places that the kids use. So that was part of our meeting that we had at lunch today. We made a fundraising committee. So we're on top of trying to get that stuff done as fast as we can get it done. But right now, I would be thrilled if Jordan Peterson would do some work for us. And he may, actually, he may.
And with regard to the youth question as well, the one thing this movement has to offer the youth of Alberta is actual hope. There are so many youth in this province that are completely hopeless with the mess that Canada has turned this province into. They don't have hope for the future. They don't have a hope for having their own home, for having their own independence, for having their own lives. And, you know, quite frankly, this is what, you know, the economic engine that this project is going to create will give young people, and that's the message we need to get out there. So thank you.
Okay.
I just want to add to what Jeff said, because it's a good question. Alex Epstein, we've had Alex Epstein at a rally in Calgary a couple of years ago, but it would be great. He's talked favorably about Alberta sovereignty. He's talked favorably about the development of the development and transport of our natural resources. So that would be a good one. With respect to Jordan Peterson, yeah, he has a tremendous reach as well. And, you know, Mitch, I'm sure we'll make efforts to try and, you know, speak with Jordan as well.
Okay, next question.
Dr. Bob Dixon here, founder of Safe Water Calgary. Please sign our petition too. It's not as important as this one, but for bodily autonomy and freedom of choice, safewatercalgary.com, sign our petition against fluoride poison in your water. Sorry, Darryl.
Okay, advertisement.
Here's the question. So what do you guys tell all your friends that have moved to BC, other parts of the country, other parts of the world that say, we've worked here, we were raised here, we were schooled here, we worked our entire lives here, we paid into pension plans. What's going to happen to our pension plan if we're not in Alberta and you guys separate?
I'm not sure that I understand the point of the question. As far as Alberta pensions go, CPP is a legal obligation that Canada is going to continue to have to pay, and certainly an independent Alberta will be more than able to self-fund Canada pension obligations or old age security obligations going forward should the need arise if Canada decided to play hardball and illegally withhold those funds. We don't see that happening, but I'm not sure about what you say about people's pensions elsewhere. Not our problem. You left Alberta, you're not here anymore. Too bad for you as far as I'm concerned.
And they're already getting them wherever they are, so it's not like they got to check back in.
Yeah, they get their pensions. They're fine. Yeah.
Hi. First of all, thanks for this great event. It was very informative. My name is Darlene, and I have a question and a comment. My question is about your question. So that to me looks like it's two questions, and that needs to be more clear with the Clarity Act, saying it has to be a very clear question for the referendum to go through.
That question was drafted by Keith Wilson and I with section 1 sub D sub 4 of the Clarity Act right in front of us. I assure you that that question is Clarity Act compliant, but thanks for your comment. Thank you.
Okay. And the other, it's more of a comment. I'm a little worried about ARP and their ability to split a UCP vote if they're looking at the party as opposed to the movement voices that you guys are. That could get NDP into our government again. I don't want to see that.
Our focus right now is strictly on Alberta independence, not party politics and not people squabbling as to who's going to be the boss of us once we get out of Canada. So, that's my first answer. And, and on that subject, I would urge everybody that's part of this movement, and again, I'm taking off my APP hat, but just, in terms of practical politics, buy memberships in the UCP. The more that Danielle Smith sees the membership of the UCP in support of what we're doing, the more it's going to force her to support what we're doing as opposed to continuing her courtship with Mr. Carney.
So there was a poll that just came out last week. It said that 38% of Albertans were in favor of independence. 65% of UCP members are in favor of independence. So UCP is not the Independence Party. It's the Alberta Prosperity Project is used to provide education, and that is the source and place to put pledges, then to vote on the referendum, and then pledges to sign the request for the referendum, and then to vote. Okay, next question.
Yeah, 35 years old, green light for me. Best thing that happened to me was my parents moving here when I was 5 years old. Greatest province in the country and in the world as far as I'm concerned. Question is, I've got about 8. You want 20? I'm going to go for 80. I got a lot of people in work. My neighbors are retired, recently moved to Alberta. Is this going to affect them if we did separate? Are they going to be able to still collect their pensions that they may have earned elsewhere in the country?
Of course. In the same way that, that Albertans or anybody else in Canada lives in Florida or lives in Costa Rica or whatever it is, your accrued pension rights from wherever you accrued them are collectible wherever you live. The other thing, too, that I want to make sure everybody really understands, the Canadian government does not recognize the renunciation of Canadian citizenship. So once Alberta votes for independence, We're all still Canadian citizens. We all still have Canadian passports. I mean, look at Mark Carney and that silly Mike Myers that came up from California to tell us all how to vote. You know, they both have 3 or 4 passports. You know, Mike Myers is a UK citizen, Canadian citizen, US citizen. He can pick a frickin' passport any day of the week because that's what globalists do. So, you know, all of us will, you know, remain Canadian citizens. We'll still have our Canadian passports. And the day that we issue them, you know, I want to be first in line to proudly hold an Alberta passport because that's what I want to travel under.
We did some mock-ups of Alberta passports. You remember that? They're brilliant. Okay, here we go. Your next question.
How you doing? My name's Kurt. My question revolves around currency. Sorry. When we decide to adopt a currency and I hold assets and I hold a balance on those assets, which way does that swing? Is it a Canadian currency or the other?
Well, it would depend on your assets, I would think. I mean, I'm not your broker. I think you probably should figure it out with him.
Yeah, we can't provide financial advice. Okay. I'm voting that the mortgage is in Canadian dollars and I'm paid in US dollars. Like, that's the way I want. That's like a 40% increase for me. Okay, where are we? Here we go.
Hey, my name's Darcy. I'm a first timer here. I'm so inspired by you guys. Thank you so much. So,
thank you.
This gave me a lot of hope. Now, what doesn't give me hope is when you bring up the Canadian dollar, the inflation, the melting currency that it is. I'm not so terribly fond of the alternative, which others have brought up, which is the American dollar, which is also a melting currency through inflation. I'm surprised that you don't accept Bitcoin in donations. And
question now.
Here's my question. Will you accept Bitcoin? And if not, can I help you with a strategy? I'm well connected.
Okay, where's the lady to talk to?
Well,
she's here somewhere.
I'll start off. Yeah. There's no reason why people can't purchase Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency that they want. But the fiat currency that Alberta will eventually have, there's going to have to be a transition because the Alberta currency, as stated earlier, will certainly tank. So
You mean the Canadian currency?
Sorry, the Canadian currency, sorry. So there's no question that it will facilitate our relationship with the U.S. And on trade, etc., if we adopt the U.S. currency. And like I said before, they may well be agreeable to convert Canadian dollars to U.S. dollars at par, which is a 30-40% increase for everybody right there. But beyond that, at some point in the future, it could be possible for Alberta to develop its own currency, and it would be backed by such massive natural resources. Conceivably, it could become the #1 currency in the world, or the strongest currency in the world. But we can't get there yet. That's not our purview. But these are things that we've been thinking about and are possible to happen.
I do like the idea of a crashing Canadian dollar and all of my mortgage debt being denominated in Canadian dollars.
Right.
That actually works well for me. Anyway,
Okay.
Next question.
Yes, we'll work on the Bitcoin donation thing, though. We can figure that out. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Ross. I'm wondering if you're coming out with a printer-friendly pamphlet that has the pros and cons, that for when we're talking to those yellow lights and the neighbors and friends or whatever, we can actually hand them.
We can certainly put something like that together.
We have one right now, and it's on the website.
And yeah, I was going to say, in the meantime, go to app.com because all the information that you need is there.
Yeah, it's a really nice trifold.
AlbertaProsperityProject.com, sorry.
You can double fold. You can print it yourself. It's a trifold, and there's lots of resources on AlbertaProsperityProject.com.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ethan, and
say it again.
Ethan. My name is Ethan. So I wasn't lucky enough to be born here in Canada, and I escaped not one but two shithole countries that went downhill when politicians made horrible decisions.
Is one of them Ontario?
Ukraine, Israel, Ontario. Yes. So, and I'm thanking God every day that led me to this beautiful province. My question is, I know firsthand what happens when dictatorship and governments losing power, losing grip, and having their way of life threatened. Do we have a plan, not if, but when it's going to get ugly? Because they're going to target each and every one of you personally. They're going to target us personally. And eventually, if necessary, they're going to use the Emergency Act and they're going to use force.
Can I answer this question?
Yeah, we're not here to speculate on what ifs. That's a big hypothetical, and quite frankly, there's strength in numbers, and we're all working together and working forward, and we're on the path that we're on, and we're not turning back.
And I always tell people the one thing that they will use against us is fear, right? And freedom means you have no fear, and you're willing to sacrifice it all in order to be free. So you can't have freedom without getting rid of your fear.
Yeah, we wouldn't be standing up on this stage if we were the least bit worried about that or the least bit able of being intimidated by Marxist Carney. So there you go.
I like that, Marxist Carney.
I'm just going to add, when we were meeting with the U.S. State Department, one of the questions that I raised was the possible necessity for military backup. But beyond that, let's look at what Mr. Trump has said. He said he wants North American-wide security, and he wants energy security. Now, if Alberta becomes a sovereign nation, I can't say that the U.S. would be there, but I rather think that the U.S. support would actually help fend off any sort of military incursion by the Canadian federal government. That's my feeling, okay? During the Quebec referendum in 1995, Mr. Parizeau spoke with the military leadership and agreed, and the military leadership agreed to stand down and not do anything against Quebec if Quebec had voted for secession. And I think, as Jeff has said, saner minds will prevail, and we won't be looking at that kind of activity.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a peaceful and democratic movement, and that's the basis we're moving forward on.
Exactly. Well said. Next question.
So thank you for coming. I drove out from Drumheller today because I'd like to ask, do we have any other strategy to go along with the town halls and getting the information out for the circus that's coming to my hometown in this so-called by-election that's coming up? I know that personally, if you direct me who to talk to about getting started as a local there, I'll get that started. But then if I'm not the only one from Battle River, Crowfoot, or people interested in it, are we going to utilize some of the national coverage that's going to get there? I expect no debate, so I know there won't be that.
Yeah, we're happy to talk to you about that. Maybe come and see us afterwards. But like I said, I think there's a real opportunity to highlight, the weaknesses in our federal system in the context of that by-election, because I guarantee you Pierre Poilievre will not be campaigning in Battle River Crowfoot on the basis of no more transfer payments to Quebec and an end to the Quebec milk cartel.
I found it interesting that Grant Abrams is running in that riding for the Unity Party of Canada. Those are all the questions he's going to ask at the debate. I would just want everyone to know that tonight's presentation was filmed, and tomorrow will be released at 6 p.m. on The Levine Show. Okay, so if you go to thelevineshow.com, tonight's presentation will be there in its entirety. Okay, next question. We've got about 4 questions left here.
Hi there, my name's Ryan. Thank you guys for everything you're doing for us tonight.
Speak louder. You gotta speak louder.
I suspect and I anticipate that the people around the country, once they realize this is a ball that's not going to stop rolling, that we're not just a fringe minority like we heard a few years ago, there's going to be a massive influx of people trying to get into Alberta. So the question is there a plan in place to prevent that, maybe a temporary real estate freeze as to not have prices spike?
Well, we don't believe in governments tampering with markets, but I think that's more of a question for Danielle Smith, and to the extent that people want to write her and ask her those questions, that makes a lot of sense, and it may convince her that this is actually happening, and maybe she'll pick a side as to whether she's on Team Canada or Team Alberta. So thank you.
Okay, next question.
Are we going to accept any of the Canadian debt, or are we going to tell them that we've already paid?
Oh, we're absolutely not accepting any Canadian debt. As Dr. Modry indicated, we've already put in over $800 billion in transfers to Quebec, Ontario, and the rest of Canada. And if you put interest on that, it's probably well over $2 trillion that they owe us. So no, we will not be accepting any share of the national debt.
Okay, we have 3 questions left. Here we go.
Hi there. I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. Everything was really great. Aside from that, my question is, once it comes to the referendum, is there going to be a prerequisite for, I guess, people living in Alberta for a certain period of time? Is it citizens? Can PRs vote as well? How does that work?
Well, that would certainly be our hope. That's what they did in Quebec. But again, those are going to be issues, I think, to raise with Danielle Smith. And if you're an Albertan and you're concerned about that, you should be telling her that on questions of Alberta sovereignty, only people that can prove Alberta residence or citizenship over 5 years should be voting. Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Okay, now we all want Alberta to be united. The biggest thing is how are we going to reach the Indigenous people, the First Nations, because that could be a big problem because they go on the media and all they say is we're not going to do this and that's just it. So.
Well, I think that outreach is underway, and people need to understand, I've devoted my entire life to litigating on behalf of Indigenous people in this province with regard to the degree to which their rights have been trampled on and that they've been disregarded and disrespected by Ottawa. I would not be doing this if I did not know that Indigenous people will be far better treated in an independent Alberta than they would be by the Government of Canada, because I can tell you the Government of Canada hates Indigenous people more than it hates Albertans. And and I think, as I said previously in my earlier remarks, when we're no longer sending an extra $40 billion to Quebec, Ontario, the rest of Canada, etc., and that that money is staying in Alberta, it's going to be very easy to have a constitutionalized resource revenue sharing agreement with all of the Alberta Indigenous nations in a manner that would make the revenue, in a manner that would far exceed revenues that they currently receive from Ottawa. So I think the big question for the Chiefs is, why do you keep wanting to spend $15 billion a year to Quebec instead of keeping the money in Alberta to help your communities? Right.
And Dr. Modry just has a little more to add there.
So I want to add something to that. When we formed the Alberta Prosperity Society, Jeff had a good friend, Lawrence Corderay, who is a First Nations chief. And Jeff drafted with Lawrence's input the Indigenous policy that is on our website. So if you go to our website and you hit the education button, you'll see a document that says proposed policies and governance for the sovereign nation of Alberta. And I think it's on page 17. It doesn't matter, but you'll be able to find it. It's a short section, but it clearly defines the benefit of Alberta sovereignty for the Indigenous population.
You bring up a good point, Dr. Modry. A lot of the questions that people are asking have been thought through, and the details do appear on albertaprosperityproject.com. So if you go to the website, it's not just to get pledges. There's a lot of background information, a lot of groundwork, a lot of foundational documents that are put forward to educate people about the options. Okay, next question.
Yeah, just let me add to that. There are 71 questions that we've answered that are on the website under the FAQ section.
Okay, here we go. Second last question.
Viva Alberta Libre!
Okay.
Absolutely.
2 quick questions. Number one, looking around, I see about 90% plus of the attendees here are Caucasian and largely boomers. How do we expand our base to include the bulk of Albertans?
I think we've already been speaking to that tonight. We're going to have a massive youth outreach program. We're certainly going to be reaching out into every community in Alberta and selling every community in Alberta on the economic benefits of Alberta independence and Alberta freedom.
Okay, next question.
It's quite simple. What's the point of going from one fiat currency to another? Why not have a gold-based thing like the Kruger Rand? My dad gave me a 1913 $20 gold coin the size of a dime. It ain't worth $20 anymore.
Yeah, and again, I think the answer is trade, and we want whatever we do within the common market, that'll be formed with the U.S. and Alberta, to be compatible and to work, to work on a simple basis vis-a-vis day-to-day trade. So, but anyway, thank you.
Final question for the evening from Mahmoud. Notice, he's not you. Okay, here we go.
It's okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Mahmoud. Actually, I'm unlike many of you. I didn't have the privilege to be born and raised in this great province, and which is, I do call it home. Alberta is my home by my choice. Didn't take me too long to consider this province should be strong, free, and independent. My question is for many of those side-blinded Albertans, what the heck are they still thinking of not to stand up for this province to be free?
I'm not a telepath.
And the other question, and this is for everybody here, I'm so happy to see among us, not the majority of white people or Caucasian or whatever you call it, we are a majority of a gray-haired people. Where's the future generation? How could we get to the school, university to educate our people, because we are losing the main battle from the daycare to the university because the lefty not leaving us any choice and the devil working in every corner. We are the repetitive people here while our future generation getting abused and lost in the university.
No, we're with you 100%, and we have plans for outreach into the universities, into the youth of Alberta. And you need to understand there might not be a lot of youth evident in the audience tonight, but the support that we're getting from youth across the board is overwhelming. What we're hearing from the youth of this province is that we are finally giving them hope for a future. Like, as an example, and this is just an anecdote, but that sign that says, "Do you agree the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada?" It was printed up at our local Staples. One of my assistants went down to pick it up, and all of the staff in that store, all of whom were in their 20s, that are working for a Staples wage. "Oh my God, is that really happening? We're so excited. That's wonderful." I mean, and that's just like apropos of nothing. So there's a real energy in this province and a real appetite for a free and independent Alberta, and we just need to keep feeding that appetite and feeding hope to people, to young people in this province, that if they want to own their own home, if they want to have a strong economic future, they need to vote for freedom and they need to vote for an independent Alberta.
One final comment. Two final comments, actually. You all have children, so you can talk to them for us. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, please go sign somebody up tomorrow. Thanks for attending.
And then the final point, if you have children, don't use my technique, which is "because I said so." Doesn't work. Thank you all very much, and good night.